Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending today's webcast, Pay for Performance and Metered Energy Efficiency Transaction Structure. They work and they are ready to scale. I'm Carmen Best from Recurve, and I'm the moderator for this session. We're going to start the webcast with a few housekeeping announcements and then quickly move on to our speakers, followed by time for question and answer. So as a reminder, your screen is customizable utilizing the various widgets found at the bottom of your screen. Presentations can be downloaded as PDFs from the resource list in the menu. Attendees are all in listen-only mode, but you can submit questions through the Q&A box at any time during the webcast. Presenters will be answering questions following all the presentations. All webcasts will be available for on-demand viewing within a few days. Zoom discussion rooms will be open at the end of the webcast to continue the conversations and allow for additional questions. You can click on the Zoom widget on the bottom menu or download the daily Zoom link PDF available on the Engagement Hub. Be sure to complete the evaluation form after your last webcast, and you'll receive a $25 credit towards the 2022 Finance Forum event. Your feedback helps ACEEE in planning for future finance forums. Lastly, we want to thank our sponsors and partners for their support of the Finance Forum. Before I introduce our speakers, I wanted to give a little bit of the behind-the-scenes take on our prep meeting. You can see that our list of speakers comes from, which I'll share a little bit more about in a minute. We come from various walks of the industry, but as we were prepping for this presentation, we had kind of some common things that came forward. First of which, we're really building infrastructure to scale demand flexibility and energy efficiency. And building this bridge is really all about connecting customers with the grid or our system. And at the core of that is really understanding the value that's important to either side of the bridge so we can really hone in on what matters both to customers and to the grid. These come in the form of savings, GHG impacts, maybe sustainability or resiliency, or just the basic bill impacts. But as our conversations continued, what we really honed in on was that the real undergirding for this bridge is a common understanding of performance and which value proposition really matters and how are we delivering on that performance to understand if we're delivering value at the end of the day. So I'm thrilled to be presenting our various speakers today. We have Rob Harmon from the MEETS Accelerator Coalition, Bob Hinkle from Metris Energy, and Maria Fields from JoulSmart Solutions. And I'll start with our first speaker, Rob Harmon. Rob has worked in the clean energy sector for 30 years, and I personally have enjoyed watching him push the industry towards new models of delivering efficiency. He's going to share a little bit more about his experience in building this bridge today. Take it away, Rob.
Thank you, Carmen. It's great to be here. I want to talk a bit today about buildings as both grid and climate assets, and speaking a bit about what Carmen was just raising for us. And I also want to talk more specifically about the notion of turning savings into cash flow. So briefly, I'm just going to walk through what MEETS is so you understand my background. I run the MEETS Accelerator Coalition. MEETS is the Metered Energy Efficiency Transaction Structure, and at its core, it is a power purchase agreement for what we call efficiency energy between a utility and a developer. It is meter-based and long-term. The developer also has a long-term tenancy in the building. And under that tenancy, they harvest energy efficiency for sale to the utility. The utility then places that resource in units, not as a finance cost or anything, but as energy units on the retail energy bill. That addresses the split incentive problem because you're essentially replacing grid energy with efficiency energy. That approach is currently underway in Seattle. There was an original pilot that I'm sure many of you have heard about at the Bullitt Center. They've now expanded that pilot, and they're seeing proposals submitted that are getting 30% depth in the buildings without any utility incentives. So really very impressive results from the initial proposals. Seattle did an expansion in 2020 just as COVID hit, and they've now done a second one in 2021. So we're looking forward to seeing how all that plays out. There's also analysis right now going on in several locations in advance of pilots in other places. So I stole, with Carmen's permission, I stole one of her slides here. I really think she's hit on the problem here and the solution, which is how we find value in all of these benefits that efficiency creates and how we use those to fix buildings. So here we go. In my view, there are some requirements if we want buildings to actually be grid assets and climate assets. One thing is that we need a significant deployment of capital in each building. Cream skimming the lighting, et cetera, is not going to get us to climate assets and grid assets. We need much more deployment of capital in each building. We also need, in order to get that significant capital, we're going to need long-term cash flows. If you look at the way other energy resources, particularly wind and solar, have scaled, they all begin that scaling process with long-term agreements. We don't finance wind with a 3-year deemed savings program or a 3-year pay performance program. We scale those resources with long-term cash flows. So what we need in order to do that is we need long-term, predictable, and persistent performance. Again, what the climate cares about is not what got installed in the building, but whether it performed. And obviously, if we're going to use these buildings as grid assets, they need to actually perform. So I realize we're on a finance conference, but finances, of course, is just a tool to get us to that performance. The performance is actually the solution that the society needs for the grid and the climate. The problem with finance without long-term persistent performance is that it shifts the risk to the tenants. The tenants, in especially commercial buildings, can be left paying the finance charges for the things we have fixed in the building, and then if there's no performance or the performance wanes over time, the energy bills go back up and the tenants are left with the risk of the rising energy bills and the cost of repaying the finance. So in my view, if we want buildings to be grid and climate assets, we need long-term pay for performance. So I'm going to talk a bit about what that looks like. So let's first talk about the grid side, and what I think we need there are cash flows, not incentives. So what we need there is appropriate compensation for the grid benefits from behind-the-meter activities. And we need those compensation to be performance-based if we want it to mean something for the grid. So I got this graphic, which is a little hard to read here, courtesy of Jim Lazar at the Regulatory Assistance Project. I've blown up the utility system benefits here. I'm sure we're all very familiar with these, and the societal benefits, which I'm sure we're all aware of as well. I will point out the bottom two there: economic development, jobs, which can definitely get at the equity concerns, and health impacts are key societal benefits of things that happen behind the grid that benefit people who aren't in the building. So we need to compensate for all those benefits in a performance-based way. On the building side, the key is to turn the savings into cash flows. And it's really important to recognize that we've often focused historically in energy efficiency on savings, and we talk a lot about savings. But savings aren't cash flows. And if we want to deploy large amounts of capital in buildings, the investors who do that are going to need cash flows, and they don't necessarily benefit from savings. That's, of course, the split incentive problem that we're also familiar with. So it's also, I think, really important to talk about how modest the savings are in the grand scheme of things for most tenants, particularly in commercial buildings. So some of you may have run across this little cheat sheet set of numbers. if you ask, this was actually done, large commercial real estate folks asked tenants to break down their costs, and their utility costs are generally about $1 to $3 per square foot, and that's all utilities. Their rent is ballpark $30 a square foot. That obviously moves a lot by the market. And their employees are $300 a square foot. So if you think about that, those savings that we're trying to get them 10 or 15% savings on $1 to $3 a square foot, or 1% of their bill. So we're trying to find money for them that is a very, very small portion of their operating budget. The benefits to tenants, however, are quite significant if we can actually fix the building, right? Here's that graph again from Jim Lazar and RAP. And you see all of these participant benefits here. I would again point out the bottom two here. The employee productivity and comfort are what go into that $300 a square foot. So that's what tenants in commercial buildings are particularly concerned about. They're not concerned about shaving 10% off of their $1 to $3 a square foot. So delivering savings, well, let's get back to the old model. If we deliver the savings to the tenants, what we do is we destroy the cash flows. And since those savings are relatively modest for most tenants, that doesn't seem like a very good deal to me for them. What they want is a better building. So if we deliver those savings to them, we've actually destroyed the cash flows, and hence the building doesn't get fixed at any depth. So it's left essentially unchanged. And the tenants are left with poor energy services and the current energy bills. So we haven't actually solved the problem for them. So I think we need to take our focus off of savings and onto fixing the buildings for the people who occupy the buildings. So if we can aggregate those savings into cash flows, we can get the investment and we can hence get the depth. An example of that in Seattle, I'm going to wrap up here pretty quick. So Seattle City Light rolled out what they call energy efficiency as a service. It's a meets approach. Under that, they pay no incentives. They currently pay nothing for the grid services they receive. And they're leaving the demand savings still on the customer side of the bill, which is about 20% of its value. That's still a split incentive. So those are three not so good things by my previous slides. Even so, what they are doing is they're aggregating the savings value of the commodity portion of the energy, which is about 9 cents kilowatt hour in Seattle. So they're aggregating that value, and they're buying it from an EE developer, and they're placing it on the retail bill, and they're signing a 20-year contract. So they're just doing that one piece, and what they're getting is proposals for 30+% depth with just that element. So imagine how much depth we could get in these buildings if we added to that paying for the grid benefits that are accruing, and we paid for the demand savings so that we weren't leaving 20% of the bill as a split incentive. I imagine we could get significantly more depth in those buildings with that enhanced cash flow. And all we'd be doing is allowing the grid benefits and the building benefits to be paid for. So in conclusion, what I think we need are transaction structures that compensate developers for long-term performance that's based on the grid benefits, which should be paid for in the rate base by all customers on their energy bills, and the building benefits, which should be paid for by building occupants on their energy bills. That's the whole layer cake. If you aggregate both of those benefits into one cash flow that's paid to the developer for performance over long periods of time, you can get significant depth with long-term performance. So that's, I think, where we're going to need to go to get the grid and climate benefits we need from these buildings. I left in the slideshow a slide that shows how MEETS works, which we can talk about at some point. I didn't want to get into that in any detail. So that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Our next speaker is going to be Bob Hinkle. Bob started Metris Energy in 2009, and he's really tapping into large-scale finance for efficiency, and he's going to share a little bit more about his journey today. Take it away, Bob.
Great. Thanks. And I'm seeing, I'm wondering if my slides are coming up here. Are folks seeing that?
I am
Yes.
seeing an error, but I think,
Should I hit refresh on my end?
yeah, why don't you go about doing that?
Okay, are folks still seeing me?
I see your slides, Bob.
Okay, I can try one more time on live view here and see if it comes up for me. Apologies, folks. Can someone else advance my slides? Carmen, could you do that? I could just pull them up on a...
Yeah. Yes, I think I can. I'm actually having the same issue. Rob, are you able to advance the slides?
I think I am. Let me look. Yes. Are you seeing me moving those slides now? I'm seeing.
Yeah, now I see them up.
I don't.
Okay. Do you have control yet, Bob?
Let me give it one shot here. Looks like I do.
Okay. Then I'll get out of your face.
Okay, well, thanks. You know, if people know me, they know I'm not the most, technology savvy. So maybe it's me here jinxing things. But, excited to be here, and thanks to ACEEE for the opportunity to be on the panel. I've participated at a lot of the energy efficiency finance forums over the years, and excited to see the changes in the market and also the trajectory of this event. So it's great to be here. And I thought I would start with just giving quick overview on Metris, and really do that just by way of letting you know my perspective on where I'm coming from on the pay for performance market here for energy efficiency. So Metris is a climate positive investor. We develop, finance, and own a wide range of energy efficiency and renewable energy projects and programs. And we do that through our Sustainable Energy Services Agreement, or SESA, which is very analogous to a traditional solar power purchase agreement. So we're a third-party financer and owner of energy efficiency and renewable energy assets, and cast a pretty wide net in terms of the types of projects that we're doing. So we're going for multi-measure integrated retrofits, going after deep energy savings, so lighting and controls, but also bigger ticket items that are getting into HVAC system upgrades and really longer term payback projects, where many of our SESA agreements are for 10 to 20 year terms. In terms of the markets we're focusing on, it's primarily owner occupied, although we have several projects in lease space with Fortune 1000 customers, industrial, manufacturing, commercial customers, but also colleges and hospitals and public sector entities as well. And we're delivering sustainable energy as a service in partnership with different ESCOs and contractors. We take an open platform approach, really trying to look to develop a project, bring in the technologies and equipment that makes sense for a customer and their facility. And we're funding 100% of the upfront cost of a project. We do that in part with our own equity, so putting our own equity at risk in each deal, and then working with outside lenders, and of course looking to monetize any available utility incentives, grid benefits from different ISO regions, anything that's out there in the cash flows Rob is talking about, we're looking to harvest and bring into our projects. In terms of our impact, we're in 26 different states, and if you look at our projects, they're broken out into 490 sites, and within that, there's over 30 different types of energy efficiency improvements or technologies that are part of our project. So again, the deeper energy savings. And really thinking of our mission in terms of combating climate change, decarbonization of buildings, we're saving over 2 billion kilowatt hours of electricity and over 700,000 tons of CO2. taking a step back and looking at the as-a-service market and its connection in with pay for performance, really it's built on, I think, two pretty well proven energy financing structures that I think folks in this session know a whole lot about. So traditional energy efficiency performance contracting going back several decades that energy service companies employed, particularly in the federal market, with some form of a backstop of a guarantee, at least for a portion of the expected savings. And then also third-party ownership through power purchase agreements, and over the last decade in particular, more for smaller scale renewable energy, third-party project finance, where you have a third-party owner under a pay-for-performance structure. And then, of course, other exciting markets that get out of our current space here today for this session, but you look at information technology, transportation, hospitality, you see a lot of innovative business models where you have different entities owning assets that maybe previously were owned by a consumer, and now you have those consumers paying on a per unit of utilization. So all these cross-cutting innovations are present in the energy efficiency and renewable energy as a service type projects where you have third-party ownership, pay for performance structure based on measured performance. If you have some of those elements plus enough demonstrated control, it's an off-balance sheet transaction for customers and should be done in a flexible way that's open source for customers and providing them savings. Some of the layers of the cake that Rob was showing with some immediate savings, people should be cash flow positive, but also longer term savings that go into energy, but beyond energy, into building improvements, and also environmental assets as well. Market for as a service is large and growing. I won't focus too much on this, but these are just some slides, figures from a Guidehouse study that shows out through 2028, the energy as a service market in the U.S. is going to get up over $45 billion, globally $280 billion. Some of the elements within the study, I think, go beyond what we're talking about today, but any way you cut it, the as-a-service market for energy efficiency and renewable energy is large and growing and has tremendous potential. However, to reach that potential, we really need more standardization in the market. The energy as a service market right now suffers from a lack of standardization. I think a lot of people out there will recognize that right now there's almost anything as a service type of approach. And I list some of them here: heat pumps as a service, cooling as a service, lighting as a service. I think it speaks to the potential in the market, but it also creates tremendous confusion, and that confusion leads to inaction. Confusion on the part of customers, confusion on the part of investors. And I think of analogies, and one that I think of is in the banking industry, which in the late 1800s, before the National Banking Act was passed, there were over 8,000 different entities issuing currency. It was unwieldy, chaotic, confusing. And then after the Banking Act, you have a single issuer of currency. And I see parallels with the as-a-service market today for clean energy, where there's confusion and a lack of standardization that I think is limiting the potential impact that it can have in terms of fighting climate change and really deploying and scaling energy efficiency. However, if I think you take a step back, look where we are today, particularly in this ESG moment. I think we have our global common denominator. I think we have our single currency for the as-a-service pay-for-performance market, and that's sustainable energy. You distill any project that we're talking about in the world of energy efficiency or renewable energy down to its core, and it's really addressing sustainable energy. It's addressing climate change. So that can be our unifier. That can be what the industry can standardize around for the as-a-service market. And this slide lists a couple of the key components. Pricing is certainly one. It should be pricing on a unit of per realized measured savings on the energy efficiency side and per unit of renewable energy that's generated. And that's a simple metric, but it's got tremendous scaling power, because if you're pricing a project on that basis, you're able to bundle in together lighting, controls, chillers, all these different elements, pumps and motors that are generating kWh reductions. You're able to start to bundle that together first at an individual site and then across a portfolio of sites. Also, third-party ownership is essential. It needs to be something that is a true measured pay-for-performance third-party ownership where the developer, supplier of the project is at risk for economic performance, and to do that in a way that deploys the right type of technologies for customers. And then getting to the sustainable energy element and really the ESG moment we're in, there needs to be ongoing measurement of carbon reduction alongside savings and other benefits on projects. And here, this is something that the energy efficiency industry really has a unique perspective. We've been at this for multiple decades in terms of measuring performance, measuring savings. And those savings can all be translated into carbon reduction. So that needs to be part and parcel of any as-a-service really reporting for customers, breaking things down into scope 1, scope 2 emissions, and I think also recognizing the attractiveness of what this industry offers compared to other types of ESG investments. You look at ESG investments in the U.S. alone in the last year, they've more than doubled, $50 billion of investment. A lot of that is coming from index funds, which are pretty far removed from where carbon is being reduced. And it's in items like green bonds that, first and foremost is a bond that then has environmental attributes tacked onto it. The work that we all are doing is constantly measuring performance, and doing that, you have the financing integrated with an environmental performance, and it makes for a very unique ESG asset with a lot more efficiency in terms of reducing carbon than a lot of other investments out there. And this is something that I think is part of the standardization that's needed. If you look at a building through the lens of sustainable energy as a service, you can see it really encapsulates anything that you would want to do in terms of retrofitting the built environment from energy efficiency, looking at renewable energy, getting into energy storage, EV charging. Thinking of things as sustainable energy as a service provides that unification and removes a lot of that confusion for customers. And measuring impact is key to standardization. We're talking about pay for performance. There should be ongoing measurement of realized versus expected savings. There needs to be looking at annual energy savings, looking at the carbon reporting on that in a way that fits with science-based targets, which a lot of customers are now using as the basis for any net zero plans that they're putting forth. At Metris, I don't want to get too much into it here, but I did provide a link where you can see our 2020 impact report that gets into a lot of this and has 10 plus years worth of data on the pay for performance projects that we've been doing. And that's something that we're really pushing and bringing into each and every customer discussion that we have. Lastly, I just thought I'd talk about one recent project example. So we have an ongoing sustainable energy as a service program with Daimler Trucks. It's part of their net zero manufacturing plan. So we're very proud to be part of that and part of their leadership in terms of pushing that net zero manufacturing plan going forward. There's a series of projects we have now that are covering 11 facilities. The term on the agreement is 12 years, so we are going after some deeper levels of energy savings. The current projects that are in motion right now are saving over 10 million kilowatt hours of electricity. There's other sites where we're rolling this out. On an annual basis, these projects are going to be reducing over 3,000 tons of carbon. And you can take a look a little bit at the different types of measures that were involved in the project. And I'll just highlight one other indicator here on the slide, and that's carbon count. That's something that we're now doing for every investment that we make. And carbon count is a simple, but I think, highly, effective metric that Hannon Armstrong developed, where it's looking at the CO2 reduction for an investment, and then breaking that, the annual reduction, and then breaking that down on a per $1,000 of investment. So it'll show you what your carbon efficiency is for a given investment. And it's interesting to see where that plays out in different parts of the country. I will stop there and, happy to dig into more questions as we go through things. And sorry for the technical hiccup, but hopefully everyone saw things.
Great. Thanks, Bob. That's a great overview. Folks, Please remember to submit your questions using the Q&A box, and we're going to address them after Maria's presentation. So now we're going to hear from Maria Fields. Maria is on the front lines of promoting and executing market-driven designs, program designs for efficiency at scale. JewelSmart has been especially focused on the small and medium business sector. So she is going to tell us a little bit about her journey on that front. Maria, take it away.
And you guys can hear me?
Yes, we cannot see you yet, though.
Oh, that's interesting.
There you are. Looks great.
Okay, good. Hi, everybody. So happy to be here, and thanks to all the organizers for staying nimble during this year. So I will, as Carmen said, I'll be speaking from the perspective of the kind of work that we do. So we work in small and mid-size commercial businesses, which are unique and have unique challenges. It's kind of that world between residential and the larger commercial projects. Still a huge chunk of energy use and a huge chunk of the commercial office space or building space. So and we were really founded at JewelSmart with an eye towards a range of emerging technologies that could reduce, control, shift on the demand side and create what we initially called energy reduction assets. And that's still all true today. And I love the idea that we spoke about on the prep panel of really just thinking about the bridge between the value to the system and the value to the customer, and how we are, I think, still needing to build that bridge. The benefits to this energy reduction flow to many folks in the system. I think what I'll be mainly focusing on is the system itself and how the system is changing and becoming more dynamic. So, and I guess in particular, the role of pay for performance in defining and valuing this demand side capability that is really there and has been for a while. So energy efficiency is getting a lot of love still, and again with the new administration, which is all great. It's the first fuel and the least cost resource, no matter how you look at it, whether it's climate or economic development. It is absolutely the first thing you should do. And one of the things we're seeing is the role can really be strengthened by incorporating demand flexibility, which kind of comes along for the ride as far as we're concerned, and will have increasing value. And one of the things I think is interesting and I see some warning signs that energy efficiency itself as a volumetric activity is potentially going to have less value going forward. And I think that has a bit to do with the way that the industry buys and pays for energy efficiency. And I think that, one of the key questions that I would ask is, if we can measure and control now using technology and calculate value in a granular way, why wouldn't we? Why aren't we using that tool? And I think that's in particular addressing the distribution system of the grid and these small and mid-size commercial businesses. So we are excited to be implementing two of the leading pay-for-performance programs in the U.S. One is it's called Business Energy Pro. It's through Con Edison in the New York metro area. And the other is in PG&E territory, and it's implemented by BayREN in the 9 counties around San Francisco. And there are several common threads to the program, to the programs, and that is the performance is measured and tracked at the meter using pre-established mechanics and transparent mechanics. That means that energy efficiency is standardized. We are paid over a 2 to 3 year period for that performance, which means that we're there to do the engineering, create that deep and persistent savings, and continue to integrate measures that continue to add value. And that's kind of how we earn our keep. So that's a core part of both programs. And one of the things that I would highlight is that, especially in working with small and mid-sized businesses, that there is marketing support that comes with both of these programs. So the program sponsor, whoever it is kind of out there talking about the purpose of the program, creating marketing collateral. And that's a huge help with these kinds of businesses, because talking about sort of a managed service in this way is quite unfamiliar to them. They're used to, lighting or those kinds of things. Another development for JewelSmart is that we are partnered with mCloud Technologies, which is a Canadian technology firm, and their Connected Buildings subsidiary is really helping us in launching both of these programs, especially with the ongoing service model that's important for our model. So performance measurement aligns the interests of several stakeholders in the system. And, the biggest way is that that pay for performance really aligns the delivery of the resource with a measurement basis and protects ratepayer dollars in the process. It also creates a standardized way of tracking and measuring performance over time, which puts energy efficiency within the resource stack. And I would say that's the primary role, and I think just a key fundamental part of these programs. That's a huge part of that bridge that we've been talking about. But a step in a continuum. I think it's a first step. And one of the things for the customer, we are delivering a service model, as the other panelists have talked about. This is really an as a service model, and it takes the expertise and everything that's required to develop a turnkey solution, and takes it, and delivers it as a third party to the customer, so they don't have to, hassle with it. It's really taking things off their plate. And I'd say that one of the things that comes along for the ride with that service model is that, the same data and insight that we have into the building provides a lot of non-energy benefits to these small business owners. It tends to be one of the eye openers for them as they go forward, that we're able to really help quite a bit with how they manage their building. And, one of the things out there especially for this market is that standardized measurement and verification creates a path to financing energy efficiency in a standardized way, which is still kind of out there to be done. So the energy system is changing rapidly and becoming much more complex. I would say there's a tremendous amount of innovation and kind of fun and value creation on the demand side, as I would see it. And one of the things that I would point out is that in this world of complexity, energy efficiency exists, as we kind of talked about at the beginning. It exists alongside now many other technologies that are able to create value. Even in the projects that we're doing, we are often incorporating storage, solar behind the meter, EV charging. Each of these things is measured in real time and has a value proposition to the customer. And energy efficiency really has to be integrated into that value proposition in a way that creates a single language. And I think one of the things that I think is hampering the industry going forward is that we are still working in models that are working with, TRMs and deemed load shapes and things like that really are foreign to most of these other technologies, where things are really just measured. And so what is the value of energy efficiency? It's an interesting question because, going forward, this is a graph that exists for PG&E. I think something like it exists for most any utility that has achieved a decent amount of solar penetration. And what you see here is that the value of a kilowatt delivered, whether it's generated or stored and shifted or reduced or whatever, it's now in that evening ramp. There are tremendous costs to that kilowatt hour, whereas during the day, increasingly, when energy efficiency in SMB has been kind of earning its bread and butter with lighting and different things, a kilowatt hour delivered then has actually very little value and isn't really solving that many problems. So this is, a real issue for the industry. And if you're not paying attention to time and place, you're not paying attention to that value. And something similar exists if you're talking about, care about greenhouse gas reduction. The time that you're delivering that really has to be targeted pretty well, especially going forward, if you're trying to impact that. So the future is dynamic, and value is driven by time and place very much. And still, I think the program delivery models, certainly in the area of the industry that I work in, are still fairly siloed. These pay-for-performance programs are a terrific step forward, but they exist alongside siloed programs, deemed programs, financing programs, solar storage, all of these things that tend to create a fragmented landscape for value creation. So I think that is, that's a real issue going forward. And I would say, we continue to kind of hang on to old models in terms of the energy system, old models of valuing performance. They tend to be backward-looking ways of monitoring and valuing performance. Basically the message is that the old way that we procure basically energy efficiency in the system does not reward what's valuable going forward, and we will be on a kind of a loop of not being able to keep up. And meanwhile, we can measure in real time, and I think should measure in real time in order to really put energy efficiency within this resource system and value it properly. And so one of the things that I would say, in addition to the technologies we're putting in many SMBs, we are working on some of these new market models, particularly in California, the flex market, which is a way of creating a bridge between this value and delivering that value to the customer, this flexible value. So what's next for energy efficiency? I would say I've seen a new push for some interesting nomenclature out there. There's all sorts of ways to talk about what's possible, and it continues to evolve. But I would say that the key things that pay for performance delivers are really the beginnings of that alignment between the ratepayer and the system benefit, beginnings of standardization that allow this resource to exist alongside all the others and where it should be, which is kind of the first in the value stack. And these program delivery models that are based on the data and technology are less costly, and really we should be using those tools to create new program models. And one of the keys is that these programs are all technology agnostic. It's on us to engineer and create that behind the meter performance. And again, that's really just a key part of rewarding innovation and creating that innovation going forward. And one of the, what I would say going forward is it's all about connectivity. We can't have, siloed programs that are installing particular technologies that are not connected to other things. The future is going to be about virtual power plants. It's going to be about microgrids. All of these things are coming, and along with carbon pricing. I think there's a push towards creating value around that. In order to do that, everything has to be measured and valued in a standardized way. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Maria. So now we're going to address a few questions from the audience. I know a couple of them have already been answered kind of in the fellow panelists. If you want to turn your camera on, I think they can see all of our smiling faces as we answer these questions. The first one I wanted to pose is coming from Poppy Storm at the 2050 Institute. And she asked, the potential benefits of solutions like MEETS and energy as a service seem large, but are still a relatively small % of the market. What % of the commercial retrofit market do you think these solutions can play? And what specific state policies do you suggest to help take these policies to scale? I'm most interested in hearing people's answer to the last part of that question, but if you have insights on the first part, that'd be helpful too. Maria, would you like to take that one first, since you've got kind of put your policy hat on?
Yes, sure. Yeah, and I would say that, you know, in a first step, I would say pay for performance is a way of clarifying the market. And one of the things that I just read yesterday was this grid interactive or grid efficient interactive buildings is a really interesting look at and from the DOE point of view of what's possible. Now, reading that, I realized most of the mechanics of how value is created in the system and can be delivered, which is one of their recommendations, can be delivered to customers. A lot of that is the rules of the road are defined at the state and utility level. And I do think that paying for performance, standardizing the way that performance is measured, adding flexibility, these are all ways of creating a way to value what's valuable to the system. And I think that's pretty fundamental.
How about you, Bob? What's your take on some of the specific state policies that are helpful or potentially harmful to your business model?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, specifically for the as a service market that we're looking at, I know as part of the Build Back Better plan that's being discussed and potentially will work its way into the infrastructure plan, there's talk about leveraging the state energy programs where there's going to be 4-to-1 leverage of putting in funds to the state energy programs that are then leveraging private sector investment to really go after deeper energy savings retrofits within the public sector market. That's something that we're following pretty closely in terms of state level policy. We also look at, maybe it's not state level policy, but it's getting down to a more service area level look for utility programs. I think right now, if we're thinking about 2035 decarbonization of the utility grid, I think there needs to be some expanded ways of thinking about energy efficiency and the targeting of some of the programs. You are starting to see some programs that are looking at CO2 performance, maybe not as the exclusive metrics because we need to take kWh off the board, so that's important. But I go to the impact report that we prepared and the carbon count metrics. And if you look at that, you'll see, in a lot of ways, it's not surprising, you're going to see the highest ratios are in parts of the country with the carbon content in the grid the highest. If you were to also put another overlay on that for energy pricing, you'd see that those same areas are some of the lowest price points for energy in the country. And I think if we're going to get to the point in 2035 where we've decarbonized the grid, we need to think about how to make projects and tap into value streams that are within these markets that are tough to reach right now in a lot of ways because energy pricing is low and undervalued and makes projects more challenging to do. So those are some of the areas that we're honing in on. Also, just lastly, as a third-party financer and owner, we're looking closely at tax incentives. Energy efficiency has largely been ignored in terms of any tax benefits. Energy efficiency assets are depreciated typically on a 39-year basis, like the bricks and mortar in a building, which causes some cash flow issues on an after-tax basis. So we're watching things like the Real Estate Roundtable putting forward an EQIP policy that would give 10-year accelerated consistent depreciation for energy efficiency. So that's what we're looking at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how about you, Rob? You can either paraphrase your response from before, or if you want to hone in on some specific policies that you think have promise for accelerating these business models in the future.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I think that, I'm with everybody on the call that we need to pay for performance. That's going to be a key part of the transition. I thought that Maria's observation that we need to move past the programs that we developed that were designed to meet our past needs and move into new programs that will meet our future needs. We need to be future focused rather than past focused. I also think that we've gotten, I think, a bunch more experience in the industry nationally on pay for performance on the grid side of the meter. We don't have much experience so far outside of Seattle paying for performance on the customer side of the meter. So I think if we want to address the split incentive problem and address the lost unit problem for utilities, we really need to have regulations in place that allow utilities to buy metered performance over a long period of time and place it on the customer's bill as energy, because of course from the utility's perspective, it's energy, and from the tenants in the building, they're certainly getting the same energy services they're getting, whether they get it from daylighting or from a coal plant, they're still getting the same energy services. So the notion that they should be able to pay for the capital and operating costs of daylighting as opposed to the capital and operating costs of a coal plant seem reasonable to me. So I think we need the utilities to engage on the notion of what it would be like for them to sign long-term efficiency PPAs. And I think we need to get the regulators on board in moving that dialogue forward.
Great. Thanks, Rob. I want to shift to another question that came in from Michael from NYSERDA. He's asking, how do you backstop your savings or generation for investors? And is it all developer equity at risk, or are ESG-oriented investors willing to assume that risk? I want to add a little spin on this too, because coming from kind of the traditional energy efficiency model, another question is commonly, how do aggregators or third-party implementers kind of build up those capital assets to implement programs if they're not being paid until performance results come in? So thoughts on this question, either to Michael's direct question or a slightly different spin on that? Whoever's willing or interested can take up the mic.
Sure. This is Bob. I can jump in. I guess there's two parts to that question. So in terms of how we're viewing projects, we put our own equity in. So we're that equity. And on each project that we do, we underwrite it to 100% of the expected performance based on whatever type of detailed energy assessment is done. So that's how we price things to customers, and customers pay for the measured realized savings that transpire over the course of the contract. So our payments go up and down based on that. So we take the downside risk if the project doesn't perform to expected, and we benefit if the project goes up above that. On a lot of projects, a layer we have below that is if we're underwriting to 100%, we often are getting some type of performance guarantee that backstops some of our financing or the debt financing from an energy service company that's probably in the neighborhood, maybe about 90% of expected. But to date, our projects over the last 10 years have performed at around 103% of expected. And probably doesn't surprise people on the call. You know, energy efficiency involves a lot of proven technologies that perform well, and that's kind of the bet we're making. So maybe I'll stop there, and others have things to add. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say that you know, what we're seeing. I think Michael's question also asked about IRR. You know, I think we're modeling 9 to 12% IRRs on the equity side, and I think we will see as the industry grows, we'll see sort of standard debt equity stacks where obviously the debt's earning a little less and taking less risk. So I think that market's just going to play out as it builds. The key is, in my view, is to turn the industry into large-scale procurement of these things rather than one-off building-by-building activities. You know, if we saw large-scale procurements from utilities for deep energy efficiency and there were the cash flows to support that, we would see large procurements of this, and then we would start seeing the capital markets bringing the normal sophistication and creativity to them that we would expect in any large-scale asset deployment.
Mm-hmm. Great. Maria, do you have any thoughts on the question?
Sure. I mean, this is something, you know, for JuleSmart, this is something we've worked on for quite a while, and the the idea of performance insurance has been something that we've worked on for a bit. But I would say, one observation I would have in the customer segment that we work in, we really do separate this idea of performance from the customer conversation. They are purchasing a subscription and a service, and it's something that there are multiple benefits that they get there. We report on performance, but they really do want a fairly steady kind of view of their building and their expenses. So they're not looking to necessarily, pay, say, on measured savings. So, that just simplifies our transaction. But in terms of the way that we finance, we are really primarily working with either our own equity or lease financing at the moment. But that's all kind of rolled into a pretty straightforward customer proposition.
Great. Thanks. So the last question that we'll take in this forum, and then I'll encourage people to join us in Zoom because we have a whole laundry list of other questions that we want to get to, but I want to end on a positive note and ask each panelist, what are you most excited about working on in 2021? I'll start with you, Rob.
Well, I'm very, very excited about what Seattle is seeing for its meats procurement. 30% plus depth with no incentives, that's a big deal. And there are some other markets where we're doing a great exploration in New York right now that I'm excited about. There are some other locations where we're exploring that I'm not going to talk about on the call. And so, I expected when that what most utilities and regulators would do is they would wait to see what Seattle did. And that's exactly what happened. And Seattle did it with Bullet, and they did meats, and they liked it. And they rolled out the procurement and they got a good response, so they rolled out another one. And I'm expecting that as that gets more headway, that we'll see more and more people wanting to engage in the conversation. And I'm very excited about that.
Great. How about you, Bob? What are you most excited about?
Yeah, I think it's, almost every day you're seeing major customers step forward with net zero targets. And I think the needle is starting to move on that, and I think it's helped driving the market. We're seeing it in programs that we have with customers. We're seeing it in RFPs that are being issued, and it's a fun time. So looking forward for that continued trend. Great.
And how about you, Maria?
Hi. I am most excited by just being able to have a program model that really creates this message and alignment between the customer and the vendor and the utility. It really has never been there, even though we've kind of been working towards this for quite a time. So that I'm very excited about. But one of the things I would say is that in terms of, what I'm driving towards in 2021 is definitely taking that platform as sort of a basis and moving towards, say, demand flexibility. I know Marin within the BayREN territory is working on a really interesting demand flexibility pilot. In a way, I look at that as a source of greater value to bridge between the customer and the system, and we can help deliver that to customers, which is great. And it's interesting that one of the things we're finding is we're already putting EV charging storage and behind the meter solar in many sites. So we kind of wrangle through the mechanics of that with the P4P program, but I would love to see, the potential for even driving further connection between energy efficiency and demand flexibility, where I really see the measurement that's where the value is really going to get created is in those time-based measurements.
Great. Well, thank you all for your perspectives today. Thank you for your presentations and to all of the attendees participating in today's webcast. And again, if you'd like to continue the conversation, we're all going to be migrating over to a Zoom chat room. And you can click on that Zoom widget at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to join us for a longer conversation. We have some questions about bridging the gap with the customer conversation. We have some other questions about market disruption, et cetera. So join us over there and we will keep tapping into this great wealth of experience and knowledge. And you'll be able to speak freely as well in the Zoom chat. We won't have to do the text and answer thing. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you over on the Zoom chat.
Thanks, Carmen.
Thanks.